Hi, my name is Yana. I'm a modern Ajumma. I have adult onset acne. I've been breaking out so bad. I am a firm believer in if you don't want to, if you don't have to wear makeup, you shouldn't, especially when you're breaking out. Let your skin breathe. That's my PSA for this intro. So please bear with me on my really subpar skin. But this is the only time that I have to make my May. It's gonna be May wrap up video, so let's talk about it. When you hear the books that I read this month, you're gonna be like, girl, and I'm fully with you. This month has been stressful, and the reading list really shows. Let's just start right from the top with some serious relapse into childhood nostalgia. I found that my Libby has several Babysitters Club, like the OG from the 90s by Anna Martin, as ebooks, and so I read 4 of them. I read Babysitters Club number 121, Abbey in Wonderland, number 69, Get Well Soon, Mallory, number 19, Claudia and the Bad Joke, and number 43, Stacey's Emergency. As a kid, I loved the Babysitters Club. I owned not all, but like very many of the books. I tried to collect as many as I could under my financial circumstances, and I loved reading them. I would reread all of them over and over. I would carry one along with me almost at all times. Like if I wasn't reading a new book, I would have a BSC book in my backpack at all times. And I haven't read them since I was a kid until now at the ripe age of 38. And you know what? It still holds up. These stories are still so resonant today. I love how each book has the POV of the character within this world, this multiverse. We gotta stop saying that word and throwing it around willy-nilly. In this universe of the Babysitters Club. And even though each book starts out with like the same intro and carries the same formula, it still feels fresh every time because it is written in that particular voice of that particular character. When I was a kid, my favorite was Abbey, who is the Long Island Jewish girl with the curly hair, and she's athletic and a little bossy, but she was like the new kid on the block, and she was very like type A she boss style, not like Christy, like the one of the main OG characters who started the business of the Babysitters Club. But Abbey, I felt, brought such a freshness to the series kind of like halfway through when she was introduced as a new character, even though I shared way more similarities with the character Claudia, who was Japanese American. She was super artistic. She wasn't very good at math. She was very creative. Reading Claudia's, what is it called? Claudia and the Bad Joke. It just reminded me of why. Oh my gosh, Tofu, you want to sit on my lap? Tofu is demanding to be babied. Okay, continuing with my cat in my lap. God, I don't even remember what I was talking about. But I do still have Tofu on my lap right now. This cat, as soon as she sits on your lap, there's just no cozier feeling than a cat sitting on your lap. Overall, basically, I really enjoyed rereading these Babysitters Club books. I'm aware that currently the series is still in print, however, in graphic novel form, and I think the stories are similar, but obviously with a different format from chapter book to graphic novel. The writing is just different. I'm sure the voices are a bit different. I have not read any of the newer graphic novel iterations myself, but rereading the series was so enjoyable, so comforting. I wouldn't be against, but I have no future plans to continue rereading more of the series this year. I really liked Abbey as a character. She is like Fleabag in preteen form, and I really enjoyed hearing about these very realistic but still stories of divorce, of chronic illness, racism, cross-country moves, like all these realistic hardships that children regularly face, and it's being talked about in a age-appropriate, very healthy way. Oh, goodbye, tofu. Like, I was actually crying when Abbey was calling her estranged, I don't know what this term would be, great aunt, Imo Harmony, to get her to come to her grandma's darn garden party. My framing for this video is going to be all over the place. Yeah, what a thrill reading these again with a grown-up perspective. It's 2025 and I'm a grown woman sobbing over the Babysitters Club having to deal with breast cancer. Reading about these parents who are responsible for their children and doing the right thing. Security just makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. And reading about all of these different personalities. No wonder why I love Sex and the City. I was primed with a solid girl group of personalities. These kids have so much charitable love for their community and just want to help out so badly. It made me think of the PTA moms that I work with. I guess we grew up and became the grown-up versions. So if you grew up reading the Babysitters Club, or really just, I guess my big other PSA is, if there's like a childhood series that you particularly loved growing up and you haven't revisited it since, but you've had the inkling to, go ahead and try rereading it. Don't think of it as taking a step backwards in your reading journey. Don't be so petty. Don't let petty things stop you from doing what you want to do. Something that I did this month was go on a couple dates with my husband, which involved waiting around for the movie to start in the theater. And during the wait, we would hang around and do a Barnes & Noble browse. And I would always be hanging out in the cookbook corner while my husband would be in like the sci-fi nerd nook. And there were just so many cool looking cookbooks that I really wanted to purchase and read, which I used to do all the time. That's why I own so many cookbooks. But what I did instead this month, I borrowed all of the cookbooks that I wanted to buy from my library and I got this huge stack of cookbooks. And the other series that I partook in this month are the Downton Abbey official cookbooks. There is the Downton Abbey Afternoon Tea Cookbook, the official Downton Abbey Cookbook, and the official Downton Abbey Christmas Cookbook. Because I just saw them sat on the shelves like this. They looked so intriguing and I don't know, I was just really drawn to these. And I'm so glad that I didn't purchase these because I really do feel from the bottom of my heart that these are cash grabs. They probably spent so little money, I mean, comparatively, on making these because they just use stills from the show. And only a very few recipes have actual photos of the dishes with like very minimal plating, as you can see. And yes, it's nice that the historical content within these books are very interesting for the most part. Overall, like, who really wants to eat a roast venison with a quenelle, a pheasant to garnish a consommé? I think even the most diehard of Downton fans, which I'm not even one of, I haven't finished the series. I used to be all about it back in the 2010s when it first came out. I did not finish the series. After reading these 3 books, I was compelled to revisit the series because I had like no idea what happened, like plot-wise. I know that I could have quickly Googled it, but I just decided to, in the spirit of the Christmas cookbook, catch up on the show by watching all of the Christmas specials, which I think there are like 4 or 5 of. And then I watched the first Downton Abbey movie, which is when like the king and queen come to visit. And then I watched the SNL skit lampooning the show, essentially saying like, were the stakes always this low? Like, was this show really this boring? Which I found the perfect summation of the show and these books in general overall. The entire time that I was reading these, I was questioning myself, like, why am I wasting my time reading these? Do I really need to know the history of mummery? No, I don't. Out of the 3, I probably enjoy the Afternoon Tea book the best. I think that this green cloth bound cover with, unfortunately, my library book's brown ribbon is cut off, but it's very like worker aesthetics, I suppose. I learned about the brown, what is it called? Brown Betty teapot. Yes, And the recipes themselves are on the simple side, ones that I would actually be interested in cooking from. However, again, you're running into the same thing where you don't have a photo of the food, and really it's just very simply laid out shots peppered with stills from the show. But had I purchased the series, I would have been so annoyed that my favorite one, the afternoon tea book, does not match the rest of the series. Like, why do publishers do this? As much as I really enjoyed like the size and the physicality of the book, if it's part of a series, it should match the series. However, to rectify the blandness that was the Downton cookbook series, I indulged in the William Sonoma Kitchen Library series from, I think, the 80s and the 90s. And there are so many of these books. There used to be like retail store published cookbook series during the 80s, 90s, the 2000s that I fondly remember. I personally own the Borders collection of cookbooks because it just aligned much more appropriately with my blue collarness of the time and age. But if I could go back in time, I so wish that I bought these as well. I can't tell you how refreshing it is to see a recipe that fits all on one page. And having like one side of the page be the photo of the dish and the other side's page be the recipe itself. And there's no long preamble story of like what this dish is about or why you should make it. It's sourdough pancakes with blueberries. The photos are so nostalgic. I just want to live in a world where I eat crab meat and bay shrimp omelets for breakfast, or a broiled grapefruit. That was from the Breakfasts and Brunches. The Thanksgiving book is so cozy and comforting. I wrote so many notes and already have my Thanksgiving dinner menu planned. This book is like the essence of Barefoot Contessa and Ina Garten's whole vibe and aesthetics. She is a huge proponent of William Sonoma. She's a huge fan. She's a huge customer of the store and the brand. Is there like microaggressive racism peppered in this book? Maybe a little bit, yes. Like in the Stews book, for example, it erroneously labels sake as a Japanese rice wine. But this is comfort reading. I'm not gonna nitpick and analyze this too much. I'm so tempted to own these and start collecting these myself. I may just. And I also just wish that had I been a couple years older, a couple decades older, I would have purchased these at the time when they were coming out and have my original set. I'm not even going to get into what more I would wish for had I been a couple decades older. I read Garlic and Sapphires, The Secret Life of a Critic in Disguise by Ruth Reichel. Reichel? Oh, I keep forgetting how to pronounce her name every time. This is a memoir of hers from the time when she was the New York Times restaurant critic during the 90s. So really on theme here. I really dove into food reading this month. This book was published in 2006. This is fantastic. This is so fascinating. Like every time I read a book about the 90s, especially 1990s Manhattan in particular, it just feels like I might as well be reading sci-fi or fantasy. The budget that they had for these things. It's so hard to believe, but it was true. Yeah, after I got over the crime of not being born a Gen Xer, when people apparently begged you to take jobs, I just found this to be an incredible memoir of an incredible time. I find Raichel's personality very sweet and very naive, while her writing style is quite commanding. I realized that she is my IRL Carrie Bradshaw. Like, she was out and about on the streets of New York, living a fabulous life with lots of eccentric clothing, apparently money to burn, writing about her opinions. They both even have curly hair. And the winning format here of writing about her escapades that's immediately followed by the restaurant review that she wrote up about it, I found to be so fun. I devoured this. 4 stars. The Upstairs Delicatessen on Eating, Reading about Eating, and Eating While Reading by Dwight Garner. This book came out in 2023. I also saw this in the cookbook corner of Barnes & Noble, but I borrowed it on Libby as an e-reader and I was reading it, but I just knew I needed to own this book. This is so good. I really enjoyed this. This is a memoir of, again, New York City restaurant life, but more than that, Garner just cites so many different forms of literary sources, from like Sigrid Nunez to Gogol to Anthony Bourdain. I thought of John Green's The Anthropocene Reviewed, which is another book that does the same thing, where they're talking about something but using all these different books that they've read throughout their lifetime and quoting them, and I just highlighted every single quote that he used, and my book ended up being filled with just highlighted passages. But not to say that it's, you get what I'm saying. Like, not saying at all that these types of books are plagiarizing in any way or filling up space with words from other people. Not at all. It's the result of a literary life, a life spent reading, a life spent with books, and how richly they fulfill and inform these lives, which is what we all aspire for, right? And I really enjoy this particular niche genre of writing. I don't even know if there's a title for that. Do you know what I'm talking about? I pretty much just bought my physical copy as soon as I finished my ebook. So I have not highlighted yet, but I'm very much anticipating my next reread when I do go in heavy with the highlighter, but just random page. And so essentially he's talking about his life, of the books that he's read throughout his life, quoting passages from these books to emphasize and oh my God, dog. That dog was barking for so long that I forgot what I was saying. But I really love this book. It's one of those books that's always going to serve for me as a reference book for novels, for poetry, for writing. That dog was barking for so long I forgot what I was talking about. But overall, I really love this book so much that I went out to purchase it. I want to keep this around with me to use as a reference book for everything from novels, poetry, writing. This has great food writing. It quotes so many books and authors that I want to read. Some quotes that I pulled. Charlie Kaufman wrote in his book Ant Kind, "Starbucks is the smart coffee for dumb people. It's the Christopher Nolan of coffee." It's a cliche, but as valid as ever. When we talk about food, that's never all we're talking about. Food is a peephole into social class and ideological predilection. It's a gateway to aesthetics. It touches us on instinctive, academic, mythic, associative, spiritual, and monetary levels. Like poetry, it offers clues to the beauty of living. It's as revealing as sex, and as we age, it's sexual compensation. As feeder and fed, we know the world by putting it in our mouths. If you're looking for a really good book on food writing, I highly recommend this one. I read The Jigalo by Françoise Sagan. Like I said, every month I'm trying to make a dent into my Penguin Little. This is a collection of these short stories, and I really only found the titular story to be any kind of interesting. I read Bonjour Tristesse a year or two ago, and I thought it was okay, and just found it a little too immature and fell short, which I didn't really fault it for, as Sagan famously wrote that novel when she was 18 years old. And so I was interested in reading a few more of her works from her career, and I'm still feeling the same way, unfortunately. Like, they feel a little too slick. I'm not gonna call it surface level, maybe too shallow. And overall, I came to the conclusion that Sagan is just not for me, and her works just don't fit into my personal wheelhouse of like the solid being solid. Subject matters like affairs and death, I love. She writes about them, but I like it much more when it's talked about in a forest over trees, like community-oriented meta scope. And then I had the epiphany that I get really annoyed by like the self over collective humanity. And it maybe is why I love Elena Ferrante, but I really don't like Sally Rooney. I feel like I'm putting this way too simply. However, I just did not drink enough coffee to really go over this in much more depth and detail. And then the dog really threw me off. But for the Jigalo, maybe the most fun that I had reading the Jigalo was thinking about who I would cast as the 2 older females and the 1 younger male for the possible, inevitable film adaptation. Now, the big question is, am I going to go see Bonjour Tristesse in theaters? Probably not. Will I watch it on streaming? Absolutely. I would love to. I would definitely be interested in doing that. Do I think that it would inspire me to read more Françoise Sagan? Probably not. I read On the Beach at Night Alone. Did I say that right? Oh, I did. By Walt Whitman. Another attempt at making a dent in the Penguin Littles, as well as my poetry for the month. This is essentially excerpts from his bigger collection, very famous Leaves of Grass. I've actually never read any Walt Whitman, and then after reading this, I don't think I will. I immediately saw why Leaves of Grass gets taught at schools, if they do. There's so much to unpack. It's very like heavy. It's very like capital M Manny McManson. Have I read anything more white man, capital W, capital M? Probably, but probably this is up there. Oh, I see life is not short, but immeasurably long. I henceforth tread the world chaste, temperate, an early riser, a steady grower. Every hour the seaman of centuries, and still of centuries. I must follow up these continual lessons of the air, water, earth. I perceive I have no time to lose. I rest my case. I read the final installment of Captor Sakura Clear Card, Volume 16. This came out a few months ago, but I haven't been keeping up. This is another continuing series, which has now finally ended, where I was just getting exasperated with the plot and just kept continuing because of cost sunk fallacy. Did it stick the landing? I want to say yes. Did it stumble? Absolutely. Yeah, just throwing that out there. To be honest with you, I have deep regrets, again, of being young when the first Cardcaptor Sakura manga series were coming out, and I so badly wanted to purchase them, but I just spent my money elsewhere, probably on like my Agatha Christie books, or probably like my Dear America series, and I just told myself manga isn't good enough for my hard-earned allowance money, so I never purchased them. I just borrowed them from my friend Victor. Thanks, Victor. And I poured through the beautiful drawings of the cards and the way that they draw their hair and their clothes. It was just so mesmerizing to my artistic childhood self. It was so inspiring visually. The wholesomeness of the story was so captivating. And I honestly really just got into the clear cards because this is what's being put out now. It's nowhere near as strong. Even the drawings and the art, it's lacking, but it's just my way of capturing the feeling of my youth. Do I recommend this series? Absolutely not. But definitely the original. It is so cute, and I mean that in the most wholesome way. I read Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt. This is like a booktube darling at the moment. I read it as a library audio, read by Sebastian Croft. I felt so terrible reading this. So many people that I love have been loving this book, and for me, it did really nothing for me. It made me wonder if I'm too cis to enjoy, or at least appreciate, the gay male experience. I had the similar feeling with The New Age. I don't even know where it is. I had a similar feeling when I was reading The New Age by Tom Crew, where there was so much yearning, there was so much emotions. I'm not talking about The New Age anymore. Where both books had so much yearning, so much emotions, so much thirst. But my entire reading experience was just mild sympathy, if not ambivalence. Oh, I feel like a monster saying that. Please don't hate me. Like, I just found this main character in particular to be too self-absorbed. And then I just completely fell off this high yearning wagon at the ending with all that FOMO, which is a trope that I just don't find to be beautiful at all. And it was when my inner Ajima just raged at the character. Like, don't fall for this fantasy, because it is a fantasy, and if that's what you cling to, nothing will ever satisfy you. That's like my mom finger wagging. I thought the writing was really nice, but how can I say that when I'm saying that it wasn't evoking the feelings that it was talking about? I still have his All Down Darkness Wide that I really do want to read. Open Heaven is only Hewitt's second book, I think. So I'm at a we'll see if I continue with more Hewitt. But this really brings up the question of, should we be reading all these booktube darlings? Obviously, not every book is meant for us. Not everyone has to enjoy something the same way that other people enjoy it, obviously. Nevertheless, I just have really bad feelings about this reading experience. You know, I can't claim that I have like so many gay male friends, but I do have some, and I want to connect with them in so many ways. But I'm finding that this in particular, the gay male experience book, just is not one of them. But I so wish that it can be. I apologize from the bottom of my heart that this just ain't it for me. What I ended up enjoying so much more was The Last Slaveship, the true story of how Clotilda was found, her descendants, and Extraordinary Reckoning by Ben Raines. This was published in 2022. I read it as a library audiobook, and I read this so fast because this was so immersive, such a compulsive read, that I really wrote down very few notes because it really felt like going down a wiki spiral into a random subject that you never thought about before. But this is a subject that everyone should know about. Complete with a treasure hunt story, all told in a very natural storytelling style. This is so adventurous. I enjoy the personal element of Raines taking it upon himself to find the Clotilda ship. It was the last ship to ever bring African slaves into America, even when it was still illegal to do so. The layout of the story starts with a man named Cujo and follows his descendants. It follows the descendants of the white slave owners, and it even follows the descendants of the African slave sellers. And there's this emphasis on communication and forgiveness. Chef's kiss. I just found this to be so excellent. Of course, this was another excellent nonfiction recommendation from Audrey Approves. Yeah, this was a highlight. I read Marian Twinette by Antonia Fraser. This book I have owned since 2001, I think, because this is the original paperback copy. Straightforward, but incredibly immersive historical biography of Marie Antoinette that the Sofia Coppola film was inspired by. I had to read it after rewatching the film on Sofia Coppola's birthday. I've been meaning to read this because I really enjoyed Fraser's The Six Wives of Henry VIII. And that's really one of the things that I found the most interesting out of this reading experience, comparing this, fairly dry historical text with Coppola's gloriously resonant ode to the most fab 18th century teenage life. When you really think about it, the pressures of a Queen of France and a young, hot, rich girl are not dissimilar. And in her case, one and the same. Of course, Coppola took away what she did, identified with the poor, lonely, rich girl, struggling to carve her way through her gigantic, famous family that she's part of. And I love her for it. It's one of my favorite films. Definitely my favorite of Coppola's. Despite my questioning if I'm guilty of the Gatsby effect, where, am I glorifying the opulence unironically instead of focusing on the inequality of a monarchical system? But when you really get down to the book itself, I kept thinking of that horrible that horrible Carolyn Bessette Kennedy book written by Elizabeth Beller, because Antonia Fraser knows the correct way how to kiss ass. This is such an advocacy for Marie Antoinette. Politics is not her strong suit. She was clever, but she wasn't an intellectual. How was she supposed to know how much money she was spending? And I so wanted to chant "Eat the Rich" but while reading this, but in the end I just couldn't, because What was really going on at this time was extremist politics, and that is never okay. That's always very sad. And this is, in essence, a very sad story. He should be killed not for what he'd done, but for what he was. If you have ever been curious about Marian Twinette, I highly recommend this book to start out with. It really does a good job in getting like the vibe of the times very well and seeing the personal side to her story. I read Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson as a library audiobook, which was read by the actress Ginnifer Goodwin, who does a really good job reading this really fun, fast, again, compulsive read of an incredibly dramatic and pivotal summer of a young girl. This cements me really liking Kevin Wilson as a writer. I kept thinking of Tom Perrotta, of whose books I've so far read, The Leftovers and Little Children. Like, they are both such strong American contemporary voices, writing about family, writing about normal lives. Except Kevin Wilson is a lot more earnest, more wholesome, more fun, more golden retriever-y. So between this and I'm blanking on the other book that I read of his earlier this year too. But between these two books I've read of his, I would definitely continue to read more of his books in future. It's not like they're all 5 stars for me. They're actually more of like a solid, comfortable 3-star books. I have a couple writers like that whose books, like the writers, I thoroughly enjoy. They're not like all comforting, but it is a particular kind of comfort. And it's not like their books I'll think are the best ever by any means. I will be solid like 3 to 4 stars books and writers, but I will always think very fondly of them. And Kevin Wilson has become one of those. I read How to Tell When We Will Die on Pain, Disability, and Doom by Yana Hedf as a library audio, I think read by the author. This came out in 2024. This is essays on disability from a queer, non-binary, Korean-American Crip perspective. I found her disability is inevitable for everyone theory very incendiary, but more than anything else, I was so annoyed by this book by her. These 384 pages or 15 hours just felt interminable. When filled with, in summation, this sucks, things shouldn't be this way, I shouldn't have to put up with this, everything is unfair. I just found this to be very patronizing and very self-absorbed. I want to give this so much more sympathy and respect and space, like they think and advocate for those who are extremely marginalized and overlooked all the time. But it's too hard to when they keep putting the focus on themselves and their needs and just not really working with the realities of life. And they just seem very clearly not interested in what can be done and only what should be done, like in an idealistic utopian society. I just found myself to have very little patience for that this month, especially after seeing Warfare, the new Alex Garland movie. Again, I'm coming across as such a monster, upholding like a war movie made by a cis white guy and trashing, you know, like a book, which happens to be my one AAPI book of the month. I had no idea that it would be. I don't know, this month is really putting me through the ringer of putting a mirror in front of myself and questioning, like, who am I really? Like, I thought I believed in all of these things and stood up for these things and championed these ideals, but when it came down to it, at least this month, it's really proving not to be the case. Yeah, I thought Warfare was so brutal and refreshingly, all of the jump scares were like totally normal things. Like the drama is in the reality of the situation as opposed to any dramatization of story. Definitely doesn't glorify war. Anyone who wants to make that argument is really just doing mental gymnastics. And there is so much sacrifice that people make on behalf of others, regardless of whether we should be there or not. We shouldn't, by the way. And the context of me watching that film at the same time as reading Yana Hedf's book, really not good for Hedf. I read Era of Ignition, Coming of Age in a Time of Rage and Revolution by Amber Tamblyn. This and How to Tell When We Will Die are my two feminist reads of the month that were completely unintended. I read Tamblin's Listening in the Dark a couple years ago, which I really enjoyed. As a whole, I found Tamblin's writing to be intriguing because I think most people just know her as the actress from the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. And it turns out that she's a very strong feminist writer. Like, she's another actor who identifies closer to writing than with acting. However, I was also very annoyed by this book because ultimately she comes across as and acknowledges that she is a white feminist, even though she does come in at the very end with like two guest essayists of color to like weigh in their 2 cents. But for the most part, this is like a memoir essay book of Tamblin's feminist thoughts. Her experience working on the Hillary Clinton campaign makes a huge chunk of this book. And then the subsequent huge chunk is her work with the hashtag #MeToo movement. So I didn't know that Tamblyn is a obscure but firm Nepo baby. That Nepo baby status wasn't even what put me off from this. It was really her like entitled white womanness and just refusal to accept the reality of situations. Again, you know, every reasonable person acknowledges that Hillary Clinton lost very unfairly and was an enormously qualified candidate. But the fact that Tamblyn doesn't even try to raise is that she was equally enormously unpopular. Is that fair? Of course not. But do we live in a fair world? No. So because I had that particular problem, everything else that Tamblyn talks about, I could just apply to. She also like name drops, you know, says my friend Roxanne Gay. You know what I'm saying. She thinks that she's helping, but by putting herself first and foremost, she's not helping. She's getting in the way and becoming part of the problem. And then at the end, the twist is that she acknowledges that she does all of this and essentially says, don't do that. Like, I just couldn't. What is this? I don't recommend this. Only read this if you feel like wallowing and whining. I got nothing out of this book other than having something to point to show that this is not the answer. So I read all of these books, a total of 24 books this month. I did not tell you that I reread Book Lovers by Emily Henry as an audiobook read by Julia Whelan because there's nothing new to talk about there. I really enjoyed Julia Whelan's man voice. Charlie Lastra is probably my favorite F-boy. But all of this is to say, in my May 2025 wrap-up, is that I read all of these other books before finally finishing The Waves by Virginia Woolf. This is definitely one of those memes, like it has been 84 years since I picked up this book, put it down with every intention to finish it. I finally finished it this month for Ben Reads Good challenge for the month of May. Yeah, I'm just not a Virginia Woolf fan. I feel so negative in this video, but what can I say? That's my report of my reading life this month. This is one of those books that challenges your perception of what is reading, that questions, do you know how to read? This is like Ali Smith's There But For The, where it's supreme, all vibes, no plot. It's really delving into the interiority of the characters, where it's a very simple, no, and it is not a simple narrative, where it's very rhythmic. It's all about these characters' lives, but not plotty. It's about what they think, what they desire, as opposed to like what they're doing. They speak in simple terms, but in a very beautiful prose that Virginia Woolf is famous for. This is not a book that you can just slip into easily. It took me a while to understand what was going on. And I generally love these types of books where it's asking questions about life, about human experience, grief. Is that all there is? But the way that I innately dislike Virginia Woolf should be studied. I just can't with her. Her prose is seriously so beautiful, but I'm still left feeling like I swam out into the ocean with a friend, and then I came up from underwater, looked around, and my friend was gone, and I'm left alone, adrift. I don't like that feeling. I cannot imagine performatively reading this in some public place. I would feel like such a cad. I do still own, I think it's 3 Guineas by Virginia Woolf that I do intend to read. It's a nonfiction of hers, I think. I do prefer her nonfiction more than her fiction. But even with that, I'm like, And then after that, I have no reason to pick up another Virginia Woolf in my life. But here's some beautiful quotes that I pulled. Now the tide sinks. Now the trees come to earth. The brisk waves that slap my ribs rock more gently, and my heart rides at anchor, like a sailing boat whose snails slide slowly down to the white deck. The game is over. That would be a glorious life, to addict oneself to perfection, to follow the curve of the sentence wherever it might lead, into desert, under drifts of sand, regardless of lures, of seductions, to be poor always and unkempt, to be ridiculous in Piccadilly. Also, during this read, I kept thinking of the movie The Big Chill, because it's very similar, both about like a group of friends gathering in grief and asking those same questions, comparing their lives to each other. But The Big Chill I found to be so much more enjoyable. You know, however 70s or however 80s it was. I even Googled, is The Big Chill loosely inspired by the waves? It's not. So I recommend watching The Big Chill if you haven't yet. I really enjoy that movie. It's fun and interesting. The waves, I don't know, please tell me if you love Virginia Woolf, if you loved this book and what you loved about it, other than the goddamn prose. And just what about Virginia Woolf entrances you so? Again, this falls into the category of not for me. Not every book ever written is meant for everybody. And this is, again, one of my, I feel so bad and guilty and terrible for disliking a beloved author, beloved genre as a whole of like high literary fiction. I think I kind of came to an epiphany where when I was reading Angela Carter, and I love Angela Carter, and I found her to be just as beautiful prosy and talking about essentially the same things about life and death and the meaning of it all, but it just resonated so much more. And the key thing is that Virginia Woolf is the aristocracy and Angela Carter is blue collar background. Maybe that's what it is. So that is everything that I read in the month of May. It's all over the place, I know. I don't know what to make of it other than definitely shows that this is a month full of stress and full of much needed comfort reading and just the general chaotic mess that is my mental life, IRL situation. Sometimes it just do be that way. Sometimes it's just uncomfortable and we have to face our truths and acknowledge them, admit to our faults, all in the pursuit of finding what is right for us. And even though the stars were all over the place this month, even though my inner self felt so much chaos, again, I'm left feeling like I had a good reading month this month because it's just the variety. I'm really enjoying my strategy for, having a Penguin Little every month, looking at my reading list and going, what haven't I read in a while? Like, I realized I haven't really been reading many food books in a while, which I wanted to rectify. And did I rectify that this month? I found a new series that I never knew about and want to collect going forward for the rest of my life. My favorite of the month is probably, even though The Last Slaveship was so good, I think I'm going to think about the Marian Twinette book more going forward. I'm really excited for summer reading. My son's school is about to end. I already have a huge stack of books that I want to get into in the next couple of months, and I'm gonna keep on keeping on. I'm still feeling the remnants of inner and outer turmoil between just, world politics and just what's going on in my personal life and what my reading life is showing me about myself. Spring is sprung and she's not pretty. So let me know how your reading life has been going. Again, I try to be positive as much as possible in all of my videos, but at a certain point it starts feeling false because not everything is positive all the time, of course, and this month just happened to be this way. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know your thoughts about any of these books or just any of these thoughts that might resonate with you as well, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.